Good day, everyone. This is Mark Bella, and you're listening to Headline News. U.S. Governor calls Harris the worst possible choice of Biden to manage the border crisis. After learning that President Biden had asked Vice President Harris to solve the U.S.-Mexico border crisis, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey said that Harris was the worst possible choice to do it. When interviewed at the Ingram Angle Show for his reactions, former House Speaker Gingrich said that Biden was very clever to pass the peaceful invasion to Harris before his first press conference. Ducey told reporters in Tucson on Wednesday, March 24th, that the choice of Harris to handle the border crisis was evidence that Biden didn't care about it. If President Biden's intent was to show that he's taking this seriously, he's really done the exact opposite, Ducey said. He believes that Harris will only receive an empty title and will not do anything real about it. Biden said Tuesday, March 23rd, that he has asked Harris to lead his administration to deal with problems on the southern border. Biden said Harris will oversee a joint effort by the U.S. government and countries within Central America and Mexico to stop the growing influx of migrants into the United States. She is the worst possible choice that one could make, Ducey said. In no point in her career has she given any indication that she considers the border a problem or a serious threat. Harris was criticized for bursting out laughing when asked by reporters the other day if she would go visit the border. She replied, "Not today," she then joked. Harris described what's happening at the border as a challenging situation. According to the Epoch Times report, the Pentagon on Wednesday approved a request for assistance from the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, to temporarily house unaccompanied minors to 2 Texas military facilities. The United States is currently facing a significant surge in illegal border crossings, in particular from unaccompanied minors. While families and single adults are being expelled at the border, the administration is still accepting unaccompanied minors who arrive illegally. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas acknowledged last week that the United States is on pace to encounter more individuals on the southwest border than we have in the last 20 years. Biden has faced criticism from Republicans for reversing some of the immigration policies of former President Donald Trump, which they argue has led to a surge of people seeking to cross the border illegally. NATO Secretary General, Europe and North America alliance is strong enough to deal with the rise and challenge of communist China. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said at a forum on March 23rd with visiting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken that if NATO is united, Europe and its North American allies are well positioned to work together to address the rise and challenges of communist China. According to the Voice of America, Stoltenberg said that people are worried about communist China, which will soon become the world's largest economy. But together, Europe and the US represent 50% of the world's GDP and 50% of the world's military market, and together the alliance can mobilize to form a huge amount of innovation and technology to deal with the impact and challenges of the rise of China. Stoltenberg also previously proposed the NATO 2030 initiative. He said at the forum on March 23rd that the initiative was a response to the impact of the rise of the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. Many of the issues covered on the NATO 2030 initiative are related to dealing with the rise of the CCP, including maintaining technological superiority over the CCP, protecting computer networks and infrastructure, and building partnerships with like-minded countries. The NATO 2030 initiative coincides with the U.S. government's strategy of emphasizing cooperation with allies to address the CCP challenge. Before Blinken's departure, Philip Rieker, acting Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia, said the Secretary's visit is an opportunity for the Secretary to discuss the NATO 2030 initiative with the foreign ministers. Last June, Stoltenberg warned in his NATO 2030 platform speech at a forum organized by the Atlantic Council of the United States and the German Marshall Fund that the rise of the CCP fundamentally changes the global balance of power and intensifies the struggle for economic and technological hegemony, and called on the alliance to maintain its operational strength militarily, become stronger politically, be more proactive in global affairs, and seek cooperation with like-minded partners in the Asia-Pacific region, such as Australia, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand, to address the challenges posed by the CCP's international policies to transatlantic security and world security. In a speech at a meeting with NATO allies on the 24th, Blinken also criticized the CCP in harsh terms and vowed that the U.S. would work with allies to close the gaps in areas like technology and infrastructure, where Beijing is exploiting to exert coercive pressure. Blinken stressed that confronting Beijing relies on innovation, not ultimatums. In addition, he reaffirmed U.S. support for NATO and called on allies to reinvigorate their military capabilities and readiness, including in the areas of nuclear deterrence and digital offense. After the speech, Blinken and EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, issued a joint statement agreeing to restart bilateral dialogue with China and work together to address the challenges posed by Russia. Google compromises again with several Italian media outlets in paid news agreements. Technology company Google announced on March 24th that it has signed licensing agreements with a number of Italian media publishers to pay news content fees to media companies for losses in advertising revenue. It is part of compensation for media publishers. Following the landmark legislation enacted by the Australian government a month ago, requiring digital technology companies such as Facebook to pay for the publication of Australian-generated news content, today Google also announced that it has signed agreements with several Italian publishers to allow them to join the Google News Showcase platform. Under this plan, Google will pay these media for the content they choose. Google has signed an agreement with 6 French publishers on neighboring rights earlier this year. The EU introduced the concept of neighboring rights 2 years ago, arguing that search engine companies should pay for news content that appears when searching the internet. Google initially refused to comply, but after some negotiations, it signed an agreement with some French publishers in January this year. After online news gradually replaced the newspaper, Google has been gaining high advertising revenue from the ads that appear on the website along with the news search, but has not shared the revenue with the actual news production industry. This arrangement has disturbed the news industry for a long time. The Australian government has been actively pushing in recent years to force digital companies to pay for news content. Both Google and Facebook signed agreements last month with media mogul Rupert Murdoch's News Corp Australia to pay substantial fees for news shared on the platform. The new agreement will apply to dozens of Australian print media companies, including the Australian, Sydney's Daily Telegraph, Melbourne's Herald Sun, and others. In addition, Sky News Australia has also reached a comprehensive new agreement with Facebook, but the specific amount of compensation and other details have not been disclosed to the public. This concludes today's broadcast. Thank you for your time, and stay tuned for the next Headline News.